Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, the podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, Agile experts, including professional Scrum trainers and other industry thought leaders, share their stories and experiences. We also explore hot topics in our space with thought-provoking, challenging, energetic discussions. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. Today, we have a very special episode as we celebrate 30 years of Scrum, 30 years. And to celebrate this amazing moment, we have the one and only Ken Schwaber here today joining me. Welcome to the podcast, Ken.
Thank you, Dave. I'm not sure if I'm one and only, but what the heck? Let's try it.
The one and only Ken Schwaber. Oh, yeah, there might be more than one Ken Schwaber, I guess.
So,
I guess you could always Google that to find out. But in my head, you're the one and only, Ken.
okay.
So 30 years.
It's been a long time. Who would have guessed? But the purpose of Scrum was to have people look at things in a different way. And because obviously, like a previous way of looking at things was not working very well. So a huge effort by a number of us, I mean, yourself included, with Kent Beck and Ward Cunningham and many others, was to try to get software development back on track, to find what was the key thing that was wrong. If there were many of them, we were probably in trouble. But if there were only a couple of things wrong, a different way of looking at things, maybe we could do something. So that was the intention.
Yeah, and it was, I guess, over 30 years ago, because obviously in 30 years ago, you wrote the very long paper that UPSLA 95 in Austin, Texas. That was the coming out party for Scrum, even though you'd been practicing it a long time before. So what were those things that you were really trying to get at, Ken? What were the problems that you saw? You're working at Patient Keeper, at Sentinel, and some of those other big projects and programs.
And right after UPSLA, we went on to a number of large, highly visible endeavors like Fidelity and IDX. So things that were much more visible. The things that we noticed were there are a lot of variables in software development, like who's involved, how skilled they are. And the things we were dealing with or had many different states also, like someone passed you a data model. What shape was it in? How accurate was it? Were the data model, were the entities broken down into understandable and definitive attributes? So there are a lot of things that were treated as pretty much constant that weren't. And the way you approached things like that was very different. The way we approached it is we had a methodology of some sort, and it defined tasks. And tasks had the number of people involved, their background, things like that were treated as constants because they were never looked at. They were just treated as right and correct. Whereas whenever we got into development, we found everything was a variable. And your job was to get them to pull together into something that would represent value to the customer. So we thought, and I had met with someone who was an expert in process control for DuPont. And so this is with Kevlar and products like that. How do you control those to get a valuable product? And I said, very similar to us. And this guy said, well, if you're using a lot of variables that are in different states, you'd better be checking them all at that time to see what state they're in so that you can figure out what the next thing you can do. Like if it's about to explode, you probably want to do something different than if it's not going to explode. Yeah. I said, like if the project's about to fail versus if the project's successful, your actions might be different. He said, so, if I'm looking at what you do for software development, it's not too different from what I do with chemical processes. A lot of variables, a lot of potential states for those variables, a lot of interactions. And the way I cope with it right now is I inspect the state of those variables and the state of their interaction at any point in time. And based on that, I take some action. Or if it's a good day, no action's needed. And then I can see what the effect of that action is. And I keep repeating that until, like you get one of our Patriot missiles, it hones in on the target because you want an outcome. And he said you can only hone in on that if you have some sort of target. So that's the goal of the project. And also the interaction with the customer. So the customer says, yeah, well, that's almost good enough. So keep going. That's fine. That's fine. He said, I can't help but notice that you don't do anything like that.
Yeah.
And I wonder, because you guys are fairly smart, I hope, aren't you? Long pause. And I would say, well, a lot of us think we're pretty smart. And he said, so why don't you use your intelligence and look into how things are going? And by the way, I would look in frequently at first, and then as you get to know how things are going, maybe less frequently, but don't be caught by surprise. And he said, I would develop a culture where you are expected to use your intelligence. I would develop a culture where you frequently change direction based on what you're finding as you're looking in. And I would also, because there's so many different skill sets that are needed, have a culture where you work in teams because you need all those skill sets interacting real time so they can say, well, that's your opinion, but in my opinion, are you crazy? And you can come up with the best possible state of affairs at any point in time. So people, they're your asset. You're paying them a ton of money. Use them. Ask them to think and use what they think. If you use more than one, which is a good idea with software, have them work together. And then say, and this is just so for your benefit, we have a goal. We're going to work with you to check your progress toward that goal every so often. Certainly in detail, maybe like every 2 weeks or every month. But for you, in looking at each other every day.
Yeah.
And to do this, you need what's called transparency. What I would call is honesty. And that's not a highly valuable or known skill set today. And yet, if someone says to you, are you done with that? If you say, oh, yeah, and a killer of a job too, and you haven't even looked at it yet, there you might do the wrong thing and you created waste. So we're going to start introducing some interesting values. And so values become important. Honesty. And all of that was what came together at that discussion in Austin, Texas. And we weren't describing all of that in depth. We didn't realize how deep of a culture change we were asking for, but we were describing a framework or a number of things that could happen across time that would engender all those things. And I think that was one of the big reasons people got so surprised by Scrum is when it engendered and required those attributes. Well, what do you mean? I was pretty honest. We used to give classes, and in the classes, we'd have exercises where people had a chance to tell the truth, tell what they really saw, and tell what they really felt and thought, or not, to cover it up. And over again, people discovered that they were used to the easy way out. And of course, your parents say, well, have you cleaned your room yet? Oh, yeah, Dad. Oh, yeah. We all learned very early, that maybe shading the truth might be a good technique. And here we were saying, to really be successful with this type of work, you can't shade the truth. it might not be completely accurate, but give us your best opinion impression. And you can imagine what people thought of that.
Well, some loved it, particularly the people building the things usually. But then how that fitted into an organization is always very challenging. It's funny you mentioned Fidelity, one of the earliest adopters of Scrum and a fantastic company, doing a lot of amazing things. But it took them a long time to reconcile the personal objectives that Fidelity has, individuals, very individualistic, very, I wouldn't say avoiding the truth, but definitely positioning the truth accordingly. And then whereas Scrum was sort of highlighting mistakes early, problems, encouraging teamwork, requiring people to be flexible, all those things. And there was definitely a culture clash there. And it's taken them a long time to deal with that. Did you sort of appreciate that level of culture challenge when you were, because you were just trying to build stuff, right?
Yeah, not at all. I was trying to create an environment where people could build software more reliably with more value. And I had no idea. I thought, maybe there'd be a parade down the avenues of Paris. There was a guy named John Cotter. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah.
He was from, I believe, Harvard,
Yep.
And he recognized this disparity between value structures.
Yeah.
For instance, at Fidelity and many organizations, if you're a vice president or anything, any role, to get ahead, to get to the next position, to get more money, to feed your family with, to send your kids to college, you had to fit in. And that meant not telling people what they didn't want to hear, except maybe in an extraordinarily careful, crafted manner. So their values might be surviving, getting along, getting ahead. And the classic techniques we have for that are, lying, cheating, stealing. and and you get put that into a team that's counting on clarity and transparency, and it falls apart. And what John Cotter recognized is the two cannot exist in the same organization. They can be in parallel, and you can, when you're desperate or when you spot something that is really could be very valuable, you can do that and work on that, research it, build it in an organization that has the values that Scrum describes. But if you are in a traditional organization that might be used to administer the products that you build or to whatever, that can't be the same organization. And John had a really neat book, which is Your Iceberg is Melting, which describes this situation pretty well. I've kind of lost track of him, but I thought at the moment he really described that well.
Yeah, and obviously he then wrote the book Accelerate, which then described this idea of building these separate organizations as studios, as we called them. Scrum Studio was an idea that we experimented with for a while. And they actually did this in many large organizations. And they found there was an airline company, I probably can't say their name, but a large airline company, and they were doing fantastically. They'd built this studio, they were evolving, they'd built a totally different culture inside this digital part of their business. And then the antibodies of the existing organization took note that these people were suddenly the favorites, and they did not like that. So suddenly they didn't have access to those APIs. They didn't have access to those stakeholders. They didn't have access to the legal department or whatever they needed, or the web deployment, and suddenly the studio started to fall apart because of that. It is, and I think that's what Cotter found when he tried to build these. He called them startups inside organizations. That the organization at a certain point, the existing bureaucracy and structures of the organization ultimately get fed up and deal with that. So I know it sounds, maybe if our listeners are listening and they're like, oh, we're all doomed, but there have been lots of successes. Scrum has actually in my opinion, been fundamental to the amount of software, like it or not, that we're using today, because it has created this culture where people deliver more frequently, whether you call it DevOps or continuous delivery, a culture where people are trying to get to value, goals. We talk about the retrospectives and sprint reviews are now more common. The backlog is more common. Those things. So there's definitely been some good things about Scrum. Are you ever shocked though that millions of people are practicing Scrum every day?
No, it's kind of like, am I shocked that people look at what's happening and make decisions on it? No. And what Scrum requires is you tell the truth. So I actually attributed the Agile movement and Scrum with the burgeoning amount of software products that came onto the market 98, 99, up through and including today. All sorts of places that were innovating used it. What I have also noticed in parallel, which fits with John Cotter's observation, was that organizations that based everything on Agile and the values we discussed and used Scrum didn't continue that way. The name of a company, a music company, Spotify.
Oh yeah, the Spotify model. Yeah.
They use Scrum. They came up with some very innovative structures for it. And last I've heard, they've gone kind of more back into a formal structure and formal career paths and all of that. And that's what I've seen over and over again is if you really need something, if you have a brilliant idea, if you really want to try something, use Scrum. If you need a break, if you want to rest, if you don't have anything urgent or important to do right now, go back to the normal structure and just roll it along for a while. I saw that really clearly at that was Motorola.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. It burst open the market for
mobile phones, yeah.
Personal phones, yeah. And I'm there giving a talk about Scrum, and someone said, "Gee, this is a lot like what the people who came up with the flip phone used." And I said, "Incredible! How many people were there?" I said, "Oh, it's a small team of like 5 or 6, and no one thought it would go anywhere, so they left them alone, gave them what they needed." I said, "Incredible!" So they came up with the flip phone, and I said, "So what are they doing now?" They said, "Oh, well, obviously we can't change like that." So they're going around giving talks at Motorola. And I'm like, okay. So the good news is I think we've come up with something that really, really works. The bad news is it scares the bejesus out of people who would like comfort and relaxation and a large degree of certainty. It puts a huge demand on your values and your honesty and your intelligence and your ability to cooperate. But that's what you pay to get something that you want.
Yeah. It is funny that organizations at a certain point think there's too much to lose. It's almost as though risk becomes more important than value. Yeah, I've seen this over and over again. I might have even been part of it in certain big companies. At a certain point, releasing things becomes so scary. You don't really want to. I wouldn't want to be a product owner and have the target on my back because it's so scary, But ultimately, that is the only way to innovate and to deliver value. And Scrum teaches us that over and over again. You have to get stuff in front of people. You have to get feedback. And sometimes you're going to make mistakes.
Well, Scrum also offers, and Agile in general, techniques, like you said, the product backlog, that get mainlined because there's no other way to do it. So we had a workflow product being developed in Fidelity, and someone else was developing a variant of it in Salt Lake City. Interesting, and tons of money being put into both. And we said, well, why don't we get them kind of like both to be one product, because they are supporting the same type of business. And the way they got that to happen is they said, okay, well, let's look what you have coming up for the product coming out of Salt Lake City, same in Boston, and create a backlog. And every month, we will revise the backlog to figure out what to do next to the combined product. And if you're there, you get to say what you'd like, and we get to argue it through and come up with what we want. If you're not, whoever is there gets to choose the direction for the next month. And people say, oh my God, if that's how it's going to be done, I better be there. And the first sessions were, well, very quiet, and then they got very grim and noisy, and then they became a way of doing business because they realized they were going to be using that product. And that's part of Scrum. Asking for honesty. It's part of it, getting people to work together and agree on things. And it's also part of it, not wasting a ton of money doing things that are useless.
Yeah. I mean, that's the essence. Empiricism, self-management, and continuous improvement are the cornerstones of Scrum. So it's 2025 now, 30 years of Scrum since the paper anyway, longer in real time. LLMs, AI have become a huge part of the discussion, the narrative in organizations. This technology, some people say it's going to be as big as the printing press. It's going to revolutionize everything. And, I use it. It's certainly useful. What do you think that is? I mean, Scrum's all about people working together to deliver value. What happens if some of those people are AIs? What happens if it's not just teams? What's your take on that, Ken?
AI they are tools.
Yeah.
Now, when an AI gains sentience and can sit up next to me and talk to me and share ideas and be open and take criticism and be, sentience is being conscious and self-aware. And
Yeah.
those are some of the things that we'd like for a team member. So I'm all for anything as a team member that could display those attributes and work with me on a team. In the meantime, to me, what they are tools that can help team members.
Yeah, though I have to say, I have worked on some teams where I'm not totally sure some of my team members were sentient, but I mean, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah,
well, that's on people.
Yes.
Are you sentient?
Yes, I'm sure some of them have failed the Turing test. That's for sure. Some of my teammates. So it is interesting that as a tool, particularly these large language models, what I've found is that the ideas of continuous inspection and adaptation, transparency, challenging the outputs of these things is crucial. Otherwise, you'll end up in a mess. And that's what Scrum tells us. And maybe my sprints are going to be a bit shorter because we've got tools that help me be a bit faster. But ultimately, it just amplifies Scrum, doesn't negate it or really change it, really.
So that would be like those old computer-aided software engineering and object-oriented tools that helped us build software. Except now we've got AI. Anything you can use to improve the outcome is fair game.
Yeah. And if it can help me be a little bit more cross-functional, meaning it can help me do things that I perhaps would historically have not been able to do, like do math and stuff like that, then I'm game on that. And it's incredibly useful.
I think we have some great examples of it being misused. So Scrum, Agile, very hard topics to present and discuss and learn about, except through example or through learning yourself on the job. And yet what I've seen lately are some people trying to write books about Scrum and how to do it and how to use it. And they have AI writing these books. And the outcome is as flat and tenuous and uninstructive as you could imagine. So I think everything has its place.
Everything does have its place. So we're getting to the end of this podcast, and I guess, when you look the next 30 years, what do you think is your hope for Scrum? What's the future of Scrum? If you were going to describe the future of Scrum, what would that be?
I would hope it helps people. So, for instance, all that a doctor uses is inspect and adapt. So
Yeah.
they're always looking and getting more information, and they're trying to apply better and better tools, a little like us developing software.
Yeah.
So I hope that that whole approach of accepting empiricism in your daily work and the values that it requires is what happens. We've seen it grow a lot. I'd like to see it grow more and expand.
10 years ago, when you offered me the position of CEO here at Scrum.org, we talked for quite a long time in a breakfast place in Lexington, Mass. And the reason why I joined, other than your very strong personality that encouraged me, was
Wow.
really that it's about helping people. I've been to so many companies like you have, and people are just so, I don't want to say down, sad, uninspiring. They just sit there doing their jobs, going to meetings,
Yeah.
and yes, they're trying to add value and they're trying, but a tool like Scrum, it just unlocks so much human potential. And I would love to see more humans applying Scrum every day. That's the reason why I'm still here. That's what I get up every day. I might not do a good job always trying to do that, but that's what inspires me.
Well, we look at our territory in our backyard, and it's software development.
Yeah.
But you can see how things like honesty and cooperation, collaboration could play very well in politics, in global affairs. So if we started anything that spills over into those areas, that'd be great. I hope we started something like that going because we certainly need it as a culture and as a world.
That we do. It is not quite in politics, but Scrum's being used in organizations like Dino Therapeutics, which is doing genetics research, machine learning and genetics research to solve some of the most horrendous genetic problems, illnesses, conditions that plague mankind. And so we are seeing it applied in those contexts, and it's getting scientists to work together. And you know what scientists are like? They hold their cards very close to their chest until they're published, right? So getting these people to work together is a great power that Scrum provides, and that honesty and that transparency is certainly changing that organization, and I'm sure many other organizations like that. Ken, thank you for spending 30 minutes today talking about Scrum for 30 years. So, is there any last words to our listeners that you'd like to impart on them?
Something I saw happen both for myself and for other people that use Scrum effectively was people felt fulfilled.
Mm.
And that is a great thing to wish for everyone. So I'm wishing that everyone gets advice and support if they're trying to do better, and that it includes inspection, adaptation, and the values we've talked about. If we've caused anything like that to happen and we can help people take advantage of it, all the better.
That's great words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
So, that was Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, my boss. So it's always a little bit nerve-wracking. Thank you for listening to today's Scrum.org community podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, come back and listen some more. I'm lucky enough to have a variety of guests talking about everything in the area of professional Scrum, product thinking, and of course, Agile. Thank you, everybody. Scrum on.